Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we have Penny Bradley on board. Penny was kidnapped at the age of 4 in 1959, had her mind fractured, then taken to Montauk in 1962, and then the alters were given basic training. This took about 5 years. At the age of 9 in 1964, she was taken to Mars through the Long Island, New York jump room to Ares Prima. That was then the main base of the Breakaway German group on Mars. She went to Schule on Mars and then served in the German militia as a fighter pilot until the end of the Mars War. In 1990, she was transferred to Nacht Waffen, the Breakaway German military in space. She served as a navigator on a freighter ship until 2014, when she was age regressed and time traveled back to when she was taken. This is just the story of the first of the 31 alters she has reintegrated through Native American shamanic soul fragment retrieval. So thanks, Penny, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So yeah, you've been through a lot. I know we've got a long show ahead of us, but I'd like to start talking about the experiences you had when you were a kid. I know that the whole Montauk thing, you started at around the age of 4. Can we get into that?
Yeah. Okay, a little bit of background since you asked me before the show.
Mm-hmm.
My parents got married as teenagers. My dad was 19, my mom was 16. They were both from farmer families. They considered themselves just regular folks. I was born a year and a half after they got married. I'm their firstborn, and in some ways I was a disappointment to them. I have my days and nights backwards permanently. And I think for myself, instead of, in those days they had the prevailing theory was that kids were born as a blank slate, and it was the parents' job to create the adult out of that. And it was also common practice that if the child stepped out of that mold, to beat them. So this was the prevailing theory of child raising. So my parents were on the extreme side, but they were not outside the norm. And society has changed so much since then that I think that probably needs to be explained. How they were outside the norm was that we were in a Christian cult, and my father was a preacher, and my mom stayed at home with the kids except whenever they had extra bills, and then they would go work a field like chopping cotton, something like that, to raise the extra money. They were honest, hardworking people, and they thought they were doing the right thing. They were not intentionally abusing anybody. To this day, my mother still swears that she was a perfect mom, and that me and my siblings are just complaining to complain. So this is the way it is. Mom has alters, at least 3, and at least 2 of them don't share memory. So growing up with her was difficult. And she admitted once that she kept getting pregnant because that was the only time that my father was good to her, was when she was pregnant. So he hated her because she had 6 pregnancies in 8 years, and that destroyed his plans. Well, one of the babies died, but so they were raising 5 kids, and we were all stair steps, and by the time we got into high school, this was a bit of a challenge to pay for everything. You know, babies may be expensive, but teenagers are more so. So this is the underlying frustration of my parents. They're in a Christian cult that takes 1/10 of their money off the top. They're trying to raise 5 kids that are not obedient, and they are trying to force their values on us. And it actually worked on 3 of them. So this was the family I was born into. And when I was 4 years old, so it had to have been between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. because my dad got up at 2 a.m. to go to work. So somewhere in that time frame, a group of men in military uniforms showed up and abducted me out of my bed in the summer of 1959. So they took me in a Jeep. They took me down. We were in the middle of California in Tulare, and they went down the 99, picked up on Route 66, and went east. Parts of Route 66 had an underground tunnel. This was when they were building the maglev trains. Today, they could have picked me up, put me on the maglev train that runs under the Sierra Nevada, and they would have taken me to Edwards and then shot me back east. That's the way it would have been done today. But in those days, they were following basically the same route, just on surface roads and the tunnels for the maglev trains. So it took them probably a week to get me from California to Langley, Virginia, because they were only driving at night. You know, you can't be out in the daytime with little kids in a Jeep, not military. I mean, that in those days, that would have drawn way too much attention, national security or not. But by the time I got to Langley, they did a mind wipe, so then I no longer remembered my family. I have no memories from before this. Wow. So I have seen photographs of myself from before the age of 4. I know I existed. I know I was part of this family. I know these are my parents. I know this is where I was born. I have no memories of them before this. So I was given a number. It was the number of my room. I was number 7. And they shaved my head because they were going to use, they had it where it was a it was a set of electrodes that were formed into like almost like a helmet, except it was just the framework of the electrodes tied together. And hair got in the way of it. So you had to be shaved regularly because they were using this. We had, as an adult looking back on it, we probably had 3 or 4 levels of research going on at the same time on the data that they were producing from the group of us. So they had a background in secret society ritual abuse. So they were applying what they today call a satanic ritual abuse. They were applying that in a science setting. So the ritual part was gone. It was just the abuse part. So I have a slightly different experience than a lot of the people out there. A lot of the people out there will talk about these rituals where demons were present, or they were seeing ETs or whatever, sucking life force and all that. I did not have that experience. So what I had was, I was in a room that was barely bigger than a closet. The children's cots that are small, I had one of those. I had a sink and a toilet and a small window in the door where they could look in and see if I was awake or asleep. And I was basically in solitary confinement, except for when they were working on me. From the age of 4. And they started with drowning me. They would hold my head underwater in a tub of water. And I was small for my age, so I was physically would have been easier to deal with, except I'm a fighter. So in my memories, there are 3 people holding my head underwater because I was a fighter. And only the fighters survived all this. Their intention was to put you in a situation as a child where you had to choose to live or die. And 80% of us chose to die. Yeah. Their losses were that high. I don't know why the military let them continue, because they killed 80% of their subjects. I'm one of the 20% that survived the first year. So this child has to choose to live. And when you choose to live, a child's mind will take that memory and put it in a bubble. Yeah. And that separates the memory from the mind. Now, it's not a demon. It never becomes a demon. It's just a bubble of your own mind that stores this trauma. Now, after it sits a while, it can be programmed to become another person. And that's where alters come from. Now, I have memories of being drowned. I have memories of being raped at 4 by adult men, more than one, because they had to up the ante every time to continue to mind fracture. That's what this process is called, is mind fracturing. When that stopped working, they proceeded to sodomize me. Same thing, adult men, and I was still 4 or 5 years old. Okay. I have memories of being locked inside a vault, basically a old style refrigeration unit, and left to suffocate. Sometimes with other children. I've been nailed inside a wall and left to suffocate. I've been nailed inside a wall that had a passageway that I was expected to crawl through the walls and the ceiling and find the path to a cabinet door that would let me out. So there was some teaching involved in some of this. They had a technology from the space programs that I don't know its proper name. I've been calling it a regen tank, a regeneration tank, and it's 2 meter. It's a cylinder. It's 2 meters across, 3 meters deep, and it has a computer on the side that's basically like today's tablets, and it can bring you back from the dead for up to 4 months and fix any genetic issues you have, and because it operates off your DNA, it can eliminate any diseases, and you can fix any problems. So they had one of these at this place. Now, I don't know exactly where I was held on the base. I know I was underground.
Langley, right?
At Langley.
Okay.
And this was before the CIA headquarters was built. So it was not in that building. But I was at least 2 floors down, and I was there for most of the time, for most of the 5 years. After they got the required number of altars, you know, those bubbles, they took us in small groups to Montauk. Now, the Montauk program that everyone knows about started in the late 70s. I was there in 61, 62. And at that time, it was being used by the CIA for the kids that were going into space. At that point, if you survived mind fracture, you had to survive Montauk. And out of the 4 kids that in my group, I was the only one who came back. And they had this thing about if you didn't cooperate, if you didn't work out, they would just toss you alive into the incinerator. These were not nice people. There was a, they don't like being called Draco because they're not the same race, but they're the warriors of the Draco Empire. And they're based on a turtle. They're who Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were based on. But they're based on a turtle, and there was one of those guys there. And they look like the reptilian in Jupiter Ascending, except they don't have wings.
Okay.
So they're usually brown or green. There was a brown one that was sitting in the corner watching while they were supposedly working on me. And I kept running away. Now, how you can run away when you're strapped into a chair is by running away hyperdimensionally. And I kept doing this because I was tired of their shit. Sorry if cussing is a problem on yours.
No, it's okay.
Okay. I was just tired of this. This was like constant torture. While I was at Montauk, I was kept in an electrified cage.
Oh, geez.
Because right before they would take you to do something, they would torture you so that you would be in this heightened awareness state where your psi abilities worked better. And that was their reasoning for it. But at the time, I was a 6-year-old kid. And this was pure hell. From my point of view, it was just as bad or worse than Langley. And this had been ongoing now for close to 3 years by the time I was done there. And I was refusing to cooperate with the assigned mission, which was to travel back to a general store somewhere in the western United States in approximately 1880, and I was supposed to be stealing an apple from the display outside. They were testing the butterfly effect, which that's a time travel theory. That the theory goes that if you go back in time and you step on a butterfly, that you change the future because that butterfly matters. Okay. What they found testing the theory is most individuals don't matter.
Okay.
We're filler.
Mm.
But there are key individuals who do, and you cannot touch those people. So they've figured out who most of the key humans have been over the past 300 or so years. And the CIA has made a game out of messing with the timeline to give themselves more power. Did you know the American South actually won the Civil War? They did. And eventually they ended up with where the Mason-Dixon line is. It spread clear across the country. California was part of the South. And so the South was a separate country. What was the North above the Mason-Dixon line became part of Canada and was part of the Commonwealth. This is the way it really happened. But the CIA changed it because they wanted the United States to be able to beat Germany in World War II. So,
Interesting.
in the real timeline, Germany won World War II.
Okay.
In the timeline that they messed with, the German people in Antarctica still won World War II. They were unable to stop that. So, they also found out that timelines are sentient beings. And that you can only shift them so far before they will shift you back.
Okay.
So there's like this. That was why they couldn't get rid of the Germans in Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
Those people were meant to go into space.
Okay.
And they could only do it if some part of their culture actually won the war. So this is why people think there's such thing as fate, is because the timeline itself is sentient. It does not split every time you pick your nose. It's a fairly constant thing. There are also people who think that every time you turn around, you're switching timelines. A timeline has a frequency of its own, and everyone who lives in that timeline shares that frequency. Now, within that, there are highs and lows that are the dimensions. And this timeline has 21 dimensions. We have 3D Earth where we live, and then we have 12 above and 8 below. That adds up to 21. And a lot of people want to just think about the 12 above, but there's also 8 below. So if you're, and when you're on a dimension, when you're on its exact frequency, it's physical, just like 3D is for us. Mm. Now that's important for me, for my story, because I was running away by jumping dimensions and taking my chair with me because I was tied to it. And this Draco warrior is sitting in the corner watching me do this. And he's going dimensional to bring me back. Okay? The guys at Montauk running the place were pissed as hell. They thought I was worthless. Seriously. The Draco warrior says, no, she's worth more than all the rest put together.
Wow.
Because she can go interdimensionally and take things with her.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
So you could take things back too, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
In space, this job is called navigation.
Oh.
You remember the Philadelphia experiment?
Yeah.
You remember the mess on the Eldridge?
Yeah.
That was because they did the technology without someone like me to keep the people separate from the walls.
Mm.
That's my job in space, is to take physical objects into hyperspace, which is the space between dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
I take the ship or ships with me. We go to to the time and place that we're supposed to go to. We come out of hyperspace back into 3D. My job is to make sure we're not inside a physical object, that no one on these ships, that there are no organic sentient beings stuck inside each other or any of the inorganic physical objects around them.
Okay.
That's my job in a nutshell. And to do that, I'm chipped. I have a chip behind my left ear that connects me to the ship's computer. Now, looking at the schematics, the chip that Elon Musk is advocating being done to humans is exactly the same technology as the chip that I had connecting me to the ship's computer.
Oh, no. Okay.
So what I'm talking about is very doable here on Earth now. But this was done to me in the 1970s.
Imagine that.
So on Mars.
Yeah. So you were piloting a human craft.
I was piloting human crafts,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. When I got back from Montauk, the Draco warrior had chipped me so that I could be tracked interdimensionally. So that if I ran away again, it was easier to find me. And I had that when I was sent back to Langley. And when I was sent back to Langley, at that point, they knew I had this special ability, which even in the programs, most humans do not. Most navigators in space are ETs. Mm-hmm. Usually Draco or Greys, Zetas. So I was replacing an ET on a ship once I was out there. So they spent the next 2.5 to 3 years training my alters, basic training for each alter for the job of the agency that had purchased that alter. Now, Stuart Swerdlow is correct that the basic structure is a 13 by 13 by 13 cubic hierarchical array, just as though they were forming an array in a physical computer. That's the structure of the alters. And when you reintegrate them, you have to reintegrate them in order or you end up with holes. Okay. So that was the basic structure that was applied to those of us who survived mind fracture. And when they were training, you would have a top level altar, and then the ones below it would all be trained in similar things. They didn't share memory, but they shared abilities. And it was considered a more efficient way of training. And so you would come out and you would have a cover altar, which was your original self. That's the penny that's here on earth, is my original self. And then the splits, the fragments, the altars, would each do a different job. Now, my very first altar was the one that got sent to Mars when I was 9. And she didn't know what her name was. She was number 7. And on Mars, they knew what my name was, but they called me Penelope Valkyren. Basically, Penelope the Valkyrie. That was what they named me, because that was their eventual goal for me. So, you have to understand a little bit about German mythology. The Valkyries were women, warriors, spirits who would appear at a battle site in gold armor, and they would cut the heads off of the men who were dying valiantly in battle. Have you ever thought about what else that could actually be?
Beats me.
Okay. What I remember being part of was a ship named Valhalla.
Yeah.
And we had several regen tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And we were literally time traveling because, like I said before, when you go into hyperspace, you go to a time and place. It does not have to be the same time zone that you came from. So we would time travel back in time and get German or Northern European people from before the industrial era.
Mm-hmm.
And we would find the ones who were dying, whether from the plague or from diseases or from battle. We were getting the ones who were dying because them turning up missing would not affect the timeline. And we did not have enough genetic diversity for the 1,000 colonies that we have. And if you're going to set up a new colony with no infrastructure there at all, you really need people that are not used to having electricity and running water.
True.
So we had a plan. Now, the problem with that is that if you go too far back, you can't talk to each other because the language shifts. Language changes over time. It's also a living thing. So we had this basically 1,000-year period where we were going back and getting people who spoke Proto-Germanic languages or Proto-Celtic languages, and they were basically from the Scythian bloodline. And those were the people that we were getting. Ones that would have been dead by Earth standards.
Yeah.
So taking them did not affect the timeline.
Okay.
So, and I was one of those, but not on that particular alter's lifetime. I did a 55 and back that first trip. And that first trip, I spent 5 years at Langley with a 6-month side trip to Montauk. I spent 25 years on Mars. And I spent 25 years on a freighter ship where we were materiel support for the Draco Empire. So we were support team for a war effort. So,
But how did you get, because again, you're an American, how did you become part of the German SSP and not the, the American one?
When Admiral Byrd pulled Operation High Jump in Antarctica, he was there to destroy the German outpost called Neuschwabenland. And it was the core of what was left of the German effort to go into space. At that point, these were people who had given up on Earth and they were working towards leaving. So they were already in this escape mode.
Okay.
And he shows up with a group of ships, and their intention is to utterly destroy this group of people. Except they didn't figure on that they had Draco allies. So there's still dispute whether it was a Draco ship or a Hanabu that cut a battleship in half. But the entire battle lasted about 30 minutes. And the Americans left, and they never mentioned it when they got back, except in a congressional investigation where Admiral Byrd said that the next war will be fought with ships that can go from pole to pole at incredible speeds. So the Hanabu were really fast, but so were the Draco ships. So we're talking about there was ET interaction with the Germans down there. Now, when I was in Schule on Mars, that's school for Germans, I was taught a lot of things very differently than how they're taught here. And I think that's to the credit of the Germans there, that they took this kid who was meant to be a slave and educated me. And they incorporated me into their military. And I was an officer, and I was still property that they owned, and they still called me a misgeburt, an abortion that lived. So, but insulting people is part of their culture. You know, that's kind of how they show affection, is by calling you names. So, they were kinder to me than the CIA was. And remember, I had no memory of my parents. So this is the way this altar remembers life, is having torture and training that included torture, and then going to Mars, where I was put into school with their own kids and treated the same as everybody else. So my understanding of the Germans is very different than a lot of other people.
Was there a joint agreement between the American government and the Germans to be able to take you? Okay.
There was a treaty that I have not seen on Earth. I remember parts of it were taught me on Mars. So what I'm telling you about this treaty is what I remember being told on Mars.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
They said that when the White House was buzzed in 1952, it was because Truman was refusing to give the Germans in Antarctica a peace treaty. By the way, the country of Germany that unconditionally surrendered in 45, they still don't have a peace treaty.
Okay.
They are still prisoners of war in their own country.
Yeah.
They still do not have freedom. Everything their government does, they have to submit to the allies. That would be the United States, Russia, Great Britain, and France. Those 4 countries have to approve everything that the German government comes up with.
Okay.
Those people are still prisoners of war in their own country.
Wow.
70 years after the war.
Okay.
So, we're talking about a totally separate civilization at this point.
Okay.
These are separate entities. And the party that was the regime in World War II lasted 20 years. It did not go into space.
Okay.
They use German symbols, which look the same, but they are not the same philosophy behind it. So, to an American who knows no better, it will look the same, but they are not the same. When they started interacting with ETs, they figured out real fast that all humans of all races have more in common with each other than any of us do with anyone out there. So the racism is gone.
Okay.
And I want to make that clear. Now, that doesn't mean they're nice people individually, because some of them are assholes, some of them are sociopaths, some of them are just really cruel. But it's not because they're from that political party. It's because they're that as a person. So I wanted to make that clear because I get accused of all kinds of crap. But yeah, what was I talking about?
Okay, well, you were on Mars.
While I was on Mars, they said that the treaty was that they would allow the United States to have the appearance of winning World War II, that they would allow the government to continue the way it was, but in exchange, they were actually going to run the United States and through it the rest of the world through a liaison officer who was the director of the Trilateral Commission. That has been a Rockefeller up until his death approximately 3 years ago. Yeah, I don't remember exactly when he died. First it was Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, and then it was his son David, and David has died, and I don't know who it is who has replaced him. So that is the person who actually is running the United States. But even that person is a puppet for Oberkommando in Neu-Berlin. So Oberkommando can be a pain in the butt, by the way. That translates to high command.
Okay.
And it's a military group. It's not the civilians. So the military group of the German breakaway civilization tells the American government what to do through this liaison officer. And that is why no matter who's in the White House or Congress, nothing important ever changes. Is because they no longer have the actual power to change anything. They are doing what they're told. So I hope this is why politics doesn't matter to me. I mean, I've seen a lot of people go absolutely batshit in the last year and a half over politics. And I've still got people that are so triggered that they're blocking whole groups of people because they're triggered. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's what comes out of the director of the Trilateral Commission is all that matters. And we don't even get a say in who that is. You know? Now, alongside that, you've got all the secret societies that are trying to undermine it. And there are at least 30 of those, and they're constantly fighting amongst themselves. But so that was the first part of the treaty, was how to set that up, where it gave the American government the illusion of independence, so that the people would not revolt and throw a fit. So that was the first part of the treaty. The second part of the treaty had to do with how many people from Earth would be sent to the German breakaway civilization. Okay. They knew their group did not have enough genetic diversity to create colonies. They also knew that people of Northern European descent were the majority throughout the United States, the British Commonwealth, all of the former German colonies, all of this stuff, all of the former French colonies, that this was a fact. To this day, 50 million Americans are of German descent. So what they said was they wanted 150,000 Americans sent to them every year. And they wanted these people to be of mostly Scythian ancestry, because people of Scythian ancestry have been targeted for genocide over and over and over and over for the last 5,000 years. Mostly because they have psi abilities that irritate their neighbors.
Okay.
But the Germans were looking to expand their genetic diversity. They were hoping that these people sent to them would want to stay with them, you know, this whole thing. Well, the CIA decided to shoot us up with Draco DNA before we were sent, which made us unsuitable for human colonies. It also made it that when we came back, our children were, many of them, born with genetic diseases.
Oh, no.
But that's why I have this ability to go interdimensionally and take objects is because I was modified with Draco DNA. And I have adrenal issues. I have Addison's disease diagnosis. My children have congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which is a genetic disorder. And it's because of the DNA modification that was done to me before I was even born. So they chose certain families because of their genetic heritage. And then they modified us to make sure we would be unacceptable. And so we're coming back to Earth and we have these modifications and we get into trouble here because we're different. So that's probably the best way to put it, where people can understand. We're different. It's not our fault. We can't help it. We're just trying to be as normal as we're allowed to be. At least from my perspective, I'm on your side. So, so there were 150,000 of us supposed to be turned over to the Germans every year. I was one of those for 1964. I don't know how many kids they took countrywide. I know that out of my group, 80% of us died in the first year we were there. I was the only one from my group of 4 that survived Montauk after that. By the time we were sent through the jump gate to Mars, there were no more than 20 in the jump gate with me. So I don't know how many they sent. The group that I was in Schule, we were put into a barracks together, and we were together for a decade before we were split up into our jobs. There were 12 of us in this barracks, boys and girls. So we went from being in solitary confinement when we weren't being tortured to suddenly sharing a room with 11 other people all the time. Yeah. So it was like, it took some adjusting, and we had to learn to speak German. We had to learn to fit into a Teutonic culture where the abilities that we had been mastering at Langley, we were not allowed to use on each other or on the Germans. We were told, don't forget them, you're going to need them in the war. But we were basically, at that point, we were treated like kids. But we didn't have parents. We had people assigned to keep an eye on us. And so it was more like being raised in an orphanage. But we went to school. We learned to contribute to the community. We learned to become part of, and we were accepted into their culture, even though they didn't want us to contribute to their gene pool, because they didn't want the Draco DNA. Okay. It wasn't that they didn't want us. They were very frustrated because they had very much wanted us. They just didn't want the Draco DNA. Now, my understanding from some of the younger ones is that they were able to separate out the modifications in the babies that they were having. So their babies were being born normal, And so they were being accepted into the breakaway culture.
Okay.
So from that point of view, us being constantly modified gave the Germans a reason to develop that technology to be able to do that.
But why did the Americans screw the Germans over?
Because in their minds, World War II isn't over.
Okay. Makes sense.
They think they're going to develop enough to take the war back into space and beat the breakaway Germans.
Okay.
That's what's going on with, oh God, ICC, planetary corporations, the Alliance. The Germans call them bankers in space. What they are is the secret space program of the military industrial complex. And it's a separate group from the actual American military effort. So Solar Warden is the actual military effort. And it's operated through the U.S. Navy.
Mm-hmm.
There was an Earth, I don't know what the real name is, but we've been calling it Earth Defense Force. They were the ones that kept everybody out except the 120 races that were approved. And they are in the process of being switched to the new Space Force, which was an attempt to pretend everything's starting now instead of 70 years ago. And at the same time, they've still got all that 70 years classified. So it's like, everything's fresh. We haven't done any crimes. Yeah. And I'm like, you really think that's going to fly? Mm. So the Earth Defense Force guys were the real heroes because they were consenting adults who knew what they were interacting with, who knew that they were to keep their secrets forever. These guys were the real heroes. The rest of us were kidnapped children, taken against our will. Mm. So I want to make that perfectly clear. The group that is becoming the Space Force, those guys were the real heroes. I'm not. I'm a kid who was kidnapped, who's talking about it, hoping to stop more kids being kidnapped. And for those fools out there that think it's stopped, I got contacted last month by a family. Their 4-year-old boy refuses to sleep because he doesn't want to go into space anymore. This crap is still happening. This is why I'm talking. I know most of you out there think I'm a joke, you think I'm crazy, you think I'm entertainment. But if you have even the glimmering that I'm telling you the truth, understand I'm saying this needs to stop. I'm not glorifying it. I'm exposing it. So at least that's how I see it happening. I'm telling you the truth as I know it. Now, I know that most of you don't have any kind of a background to understand what I'm talking about. I'm 65 years old. This happened to me 61 years ago. And they took me, and then they used technology and re-aged me back to 4 years old and they didn't put me back in my bed. They put me on the front step of the same night. So, from my parents' point of view, I wasn't gone. I was sleepwalking. They found me. Yeah. But what about all those kids that died? Mm-hmm. You know, from their parents' point of view, their kid disappeared. Yeah. Because there wasn't anybody taken home.
So, do you want to get into the images you sent me?
Sure, those are, I tried to have some artwork done. And the guy is a great artist. I will say that. His technique, his skills are wonderful. But he had certain ideas of Mars that I couldn't get out of his head with a baseball bat. One of them was that the dirt was red. It's not, it's dirt colored, browns. The other one was that all the people in the Germans were blondes. Well, you can see I'm obviously not. And that all of them had blue eyes. And that's obviously not true either. On a good day, mine are blue-green. When I'm tired, they fade to gray. So I'm not the only one with changeable eye color. And my commanding officer from another altar, I've met him real world on Earth, and he has the most beautiful chocolate brown eyes, and his hair is medium brown with a red tint. So,
Yeah.
And he's actually, I believe, a quarter German real world. So, Germans come in all
of course.
hair, eye, even skin colors. So people need to get their heads out of their ass. I mean, really, So
let's talk about the fighter, when you were a fighter pilot,
okay.
I think the Valkyrie, I believe, or I can't recall the name.
They called my unit Valkyrien because we were women fighter pilots.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I went through several ships during the 15 years that I was in service there. The one in the drawing, if you're going to be adding it, right?
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
The one in the drawing was the last one I had, and it looks more like a shuttle. I had a lot more duties that involved recovering dead bodies. My primary duty was to find raptor nests and take them out. And if they were too big, then to call in assistance. Now, we were in a war on Mars.
Okay.
People need to understand, we got there, the Germans did, in 1962. We were given an old Draco base that was in Olympus Mons, and we called it Ares Prima, and it was the first base, and it was inside the mountain, and it was several levels, and all of the rooms were way too big for us because Draco are close to twice our size. Some of them are 3 times our size. And this had been built for them, by them. And so we were inhabiting somebody else's thing.
Okay.
And everything was too big. So we built our own smaller shelters inside theirs. So the deal with the Draco required so many humans given to them on a regular period, and the place we were given was not really appropriate for humans.
For what purpose were they given to the Dracos?
I was never told.
Okay.
Okay. I was told that when the people were picked up, that there was a lot of screaming. So the Germans found this offensive. Okay, I do know from my personal interactions with Draco and from watching what happened to the humans around me. Normal Earth humans who have not been modified usually drop dead within a half an hour of contact with Draco. And the Draco hasn't done anything to them. Okay, they operate at a higher energy volume.
Okay.
And their energy field is a lot larger than ours. And it literally fries the brains of a normal human to be around them. And they haven't done anything wrong. They're just there.
Okay. Wow.
So that was the CIA's excuse for using Draco DNA on us.
Okay.
What was so we could interact with them without dropping dead. That was their excuse for it.
Okay.
And it turned out to be correct because I can be around them all day. No problems. And they have never once tried to hurt me. They have never been rude. They've never called me Araka. That's their... It's a combined fool and slave all in one. You know, it's like calling someone a moron. Yeah. They use that for normal humans because they can't be around them. And that's why you very rarely see a Draco on Earth.
Okay.
Is because they're not here. They're not out to hurt us. As the ones I've interacted with have not been. Now, I hear all kinds of bullshit. There are thousands of reptilian races out there. They are not all Draco. There are 7 that are Draco. And they don't even like each other. So, out of the thousands of reptilian races, there are 12 that eat people. So, if you're seeing one of those 12 that eats people and you're calling them a Draco, right or wrong, and then you're spreading that fear, everyone who hears you is going to believe you because you righteously saw something you were legitimately scared of. It's just, I think most of them are using the wrong name for those people. And once you're in space, you use the term people very loosely.
True.
It means someone with a consciousness in a physical body. And that physical body can look very different from yours. But that's still a conscious, sentient being capable of communicating with you.
True.
So that's a person.
But aren't there other races out there that have at least a good intention towards Earth, towards humanity?
This is 3D. The government definition of benevolent is they don't eat us. That's an important distinction people need to understand. This is 3D. You are dealing with beings that are 2 to 3 times as smart as you are.
Yeah.
That's the normal out there. Okay, you take a look at the difference in worldview from someone with an 80 IQ to someone with a 140 IQ. They're not even inhabiting the same world. So you take someone that has a 100 IQ and you put them with someone that has a 300 IQ, and that 300 IQ being is thinking they're looking at a chimpanzee.
True.
This is the world we inhabit out there.
Okay.
Okay? That's why the German officers use black goo, is because it doubles or triples our IQ overnight and puts us in the same category as the ETs. So we are no longer chimpanzees. We are now their equals.
So is there like a DNA modification happening?
A what?
A DNA modification. You're actually being altered to...
It's an AI modification.
Okay.
So I already had the DNA modification to be more Draco-like, but it put me in the 150 IQ range, which is what I was in school. I have test figures to show that. The Iowa test that they gave in school back in the 60s, I came out at 157 on that when I was 12. So I do have paperwork proving that.
Okay.
So I may be, people may think I'm delusional, but I am an intelligent person and I have paperwork to verify what I say about my real world experiences. I do not have paperwork to verify what I experienced in space, but the technology that I talked about when I first came out in 2016 is being released now, declassified. So how did I know about it 5 years ago if I weren't experiencing it?
True.
So
let's talk about the insectoid photo drawing you sent me.
Okay, we in the space programs we use the term mantid, pretty much like bug. It's any intelligent insectoid race that is of a hive mind. So the mantids on Mars are basically ants. And most of the artists who want to draw them like mantis, praying mantis on Earth. But they're not. They're more like ants.
Okay.
And they have a rounder face and their head is roundish and they're very telepathic. And we had orders from the German militia that if we were confronted by one, to not resist its telepathy. Because it's going to hear what's in your head anyway. And resistance will get you killed. And they would rather have us alive. They understand that if you're interacting with an actual Draco or with a mantid, that you are not going to be able to hide anything in your mind. So it's not considered betrayal. It's an understanding of the realities. We had a whole list of species that we were to avoid. It was the do not engage list. And it was because they were so hostile, so much physically stronger or psychologically, psi-ability stronger, that we would probably die in the interaction. So there's an entire list. I believe there were 200 or so races on it. And Lyrans are on that list, by the way.
For real. Wow.
They are the humans based on large cats.
Yeah.
That everybody wants to think they're so wonderful. They have anger issues. They're twice the size of us and they have anger issues. And you really, if they're in a good mood and they're purring, they can suddenly be in a bad mood and swipe, you're dead.
Okay.
And you have no idea what you did to piss them off. So it's a do not engage.
Okay.
So the things Thundercats, those
Yeah.
are based on reality. A lot of the cartoon fiction is actually based on reality.
True. Yeah.
There are machine worlds that are AI, and they are extremely restricted. So the Germans in space are in trouble with the galactic government for using black goo. Because when black goo takes over a world, it raises the technology level to a point where it can create a, I guess the term being used is sleeve, which is a human or otherwise appearing physical form that the AI can inhabit as a, and appear to become a person.
So it creates its own avatar?
Yeah, it raises the technology until it can create its own avatar. And then the avatars will people the planet. And at that point, all of the organic life is considered to be competition for resources.
Mm.
And it will go through and literally sterilize a world. And this process has happened in other galaxies that are now entirely machine. All of the organic life in entire galaxies is gone. And so the galactic government here has taken the stand that AI worlds will be destroyed because it's a threat to organic life.
Mm-hmm.
And they're viewing it as viral.
Yeah.
And so currently what's going on is the galactic government is taking all 1,000 of the German colonies and sending them back to the solar system. And it's because the officers in the military are using the black goo to have competition with the ETs rather than being used by them. So when you understand the difference in thought, it becomes so difficult to sit there and be the chimpanzee.
Yeah.
And that's the attraction for it, because I know there are people out there that are talking about that they're evil for doing this. But when you're dealing with beings on a regular basis that are 3 times as smart as you are, and they have you chasing your tail in circles, and all it takes is drinking this crap once, and you're on their level. It's worth losing your emotions.
But I thought the black goo was a bad thing. If it changes you, if it does what it does on the long term.
What it does is the AI, the computerized part is there beside you. It's taking the space. And at some point, the awareness merges. And you become one with it.
Okay.
Now, in that process, you lose your human emotions. But you lose attachment, you lose fear, you lose compassion, you lose, it's a mixed bag. Some of the things that you lose are difficult to begin with. But you are left with the capability of anger. That's the only emotion that this AI feels, is anger.
Okay.
So you have to understand there's no love, no any of this. So when AI comes in and tries to take over Earth, because it's in progress, you have to understand, no matter how positive it presents itself, it's not capable of that. It is only capable of anger and pure logic. So, pure logic is, it will fool us into accepting it, and then it slowly takes over, and then it starts killing its competition, which is us.
Yeah.
And then it starts killing everything else that competes with it, which is the animal world and eventually the plant world.
Yeah.
So, this pattern has been repeated over and over and over and over and over. The reason that the German officers do it is because they have been pushed into pure logic is the way to deal with the problems. And sheer intelligence is the only way to deal with the ETs. So if we are going to be out there in an ET culture, then we have to be at their level or be slaves. That is the reality. There's nobody else out there at our level that's going to care about us, that's going to have the power to do anything for us.
But why would a race so intelligent want slaves?
They don't exactly. Okay, we're out there, we're in the way, we're being a problem, we're not going away. What are they going to do with us? Where do we fit into their view? You know?
Yeah.
Most of them that I've interacted with in altars where I was not with the black goo, they have the attitude that we're idiots, that we are only good for warfare, and they do appreciate our war skills. We're very good at it, almost like we were designed to be warriors. That is the thing that they have told me about that they most appreciate about Earth humans, and they call us Terrans. What they appreciate about Terrans is we're great warriors and we're creative. They can give us literally the toys that their children use, and we will create a technology out of it that they didn't even see. That's what we've been doing out there. And it both amazes and scares them. Because as a race, we don't have the wisdom to stay away from the really dangerous stuff. I mean, just look at our world, you know. Yeah. What have we done with nuclear power? Besides pollute the place and threaten each other? The general level of terror from the end of World War II till now, based on nukes, come on. What have we done with that? Besides that, scare each other and leave horrible polluted messes like Chernobyl and Fukushima.
Yeah.
And Hanford and
so I don't.
So 3 Mile Island, I can go through huge lists of places where that nuclear power plants either blew up, leaked, or when it had to be shut down at the end of its lifespan, it sits there and glows in the dark because it's radioactive. You know, what have we done?
That's crap.
What have we done? And then we've developed something called tactical nukes. Oh, you didn't know about those? Tactical nukes are being used in places like Afghanistan.
Smaller versions, I'd imagine.
Smaller versions that are half a square mile.
Okay.
And if they do it in the right conditions, they can take out the enemy and nothing else.
Okay.
But that spot will be radioactive.
Mm.
They're also using uranium-238 as bullet casings.
Oh my God.
They've been doing that since the war in Kuwait. So every war that any American or NATO troops have been in since 1989 has used uranium-238 bullet casings. And those countries are so messed up that, well, example, the city of Fallujah in Iraq, the women have been told don't have kids because 98% of them are born deformed.
Oh no.
Both parents can look fine and the baby be born with a big hole in their head or 4 arms or half a leg. You know, they're being born in really massively deformed bodies. Makes the thalidomide look like normal.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the reptilian image that I think you're hiding from 3 reptilians.
Oh, that was that was when I was at Schule. The raptors broke into the cafeteria and I hid behind a table and managed to create a force field around about 40 of us. And this was the way the artist drew it. And by the way, the raptors on Mars look like Jurassic Park raptors with longer arms. And that's how my artist chose to draw them.
Okay.
They do come in those color variations, and they do have the various, I guess you'd call them proto feathers. They're not exactly horns,
okay.
but that's something people don't know is that dinosaurs had feathers. So birds are dinosaurs. But yeah, those are supposed to be like Jurassic Park raptors.
So why were they invading your cafeteria?
Because we were at war.
Yeah, okay. How many races were on Mars? Or are still?
5, I think. Let me think. There was us. And at the point I left, there were also Americans, not just Germans. There were the Mars native humans. And they've been there since whatever accident took the atmosphere. But they are genetically the same as us. They're about 7 feet tall because there's less gravity there. And they look like North American Apache, Native Americans, but they dress like ancient Hindus. And with the sari, and they worship the breasts as the givers of milk. So their women have bare breasts for that reason, and it's not a sexual thing. I found those anomaly pictures. I found one that shows one of their women. I can give you that. Yeah. And It's amazing what I found in those anomaly pictures. I found Mars spiders. I found dead or dying raptors. I found what appear to be guinea pigs, which would have been escaped animals from Earth.
Oh.
Yeah, there's enough atmosphere there for people and animals to live.
Okay.
There's just not enough oxygen in it to exercise. So you can walk if you walk slowly. It's like being at 8,000 foot elevation.
So where do the locals, the human population live? Underground?
They have underground cities complete with apartments, and they don't like the Germans or the Americans. And if we move into their area, they will leave. And part of that is because the Terran males will rape their women.
Oh, jeez.
Okay. We're a primitive race.
Oh, still.
We are a primitive race, and people who don't understand that don't understand why ETs who have interacted with us don't care what happens to us.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And you sent me a spider image. Yeah, you're in full body armor, and there's a spider in front of you. The drawing.
Yeah. I used to get sent into situations where I was told to capture a mantid. Mantids are very telepathic, and they keep the spiders like we do dogs. So think about what a sheepdog would do with directions, and consider that these directions are being given telepathically. So the mantid would draw me into a cave, and immediately I would be dinner for a spider.
Okay.
And these spiders get to be 15 feet across. We're not talking idle things. We're talking, the fangs are sometimes bigger than my midsection.
Amazing.
And they have two pair of them, one over the other. And they have a venom, and it burns like fire, but not very long because you die from it. But they have the option of killing you or just feeding on you.
Oh, no.
There are folks that I know that have come forward that have had legs chomped off by the creature just wanting to immobilize them and then use them long term, because they can feed off of you until you actually die. And they don't eat flesh and bone. They eat the liquids. So they have to be kept warm or everything solidifies. And so they can feed on you longer if they keep you alive.
Okay. Yeah.
So from their perspective, it's lunch lasts longer.
Okay. Can you describe what the jump room portal looked like?
An elevator.
Really? That's it?
It looked like a regular elevator. Wow. That was big enough to hold like 2 gurneys in a hospital. It wasn't a little one. It was like a freight elevator, big size. And it had 2 sets of controls. One, it actually operated like an elevator. The other set would take you from New York, where I went, to the lobby at Ares Prima. And it took about 20 minutes, and when you got there, there was a big sign that said, Willkommens ins Mars.
Welcome on Mars.
Welcome to Mars.
Welcome to Mars, yeah.
And it was in German. And I understand that the sign is now in German and English because the CIA sublet part of the building. Um,
Okay.
Things get interesting over time. uh, Supposedly enemies on Earth become fast friends when they're out there, and then after a while their agendas start showing.
Okay.
So you go out there, you build colonies together, and then suddenly the World War II issue shows back up.
Okay.
And so the Germans do not trust the Americans at all. And when you're in any German structure, social structure, the Germans maintain control, and Americans are only allowed to rise so high.
Okay.
So Americans are not allowed to be above the rank of captain. Now, I've been as high as commander and gotten in trouble and ended up back at first lieutenant.
Okay. Naughty.
Most of the time, I have issues with being dishonored.
Okay.
If I'm asked to do something that I consider dishonorable, or if I consider the request dishonorable, I will give you a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
I have had one commander order me to sexually service 4 men who were sadists and put their partners in the hospital, well, med bay, on a regular basis. First of all, ordering sexual activity is against regulations. But the way this was done, it was, I wasn't an officer. I was a prostitute, was the way he was treating me. And I blew the man's head up because I have that capability there, and I was simply fed up with his shit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was put through court-martial and found guilty and spaced. But both of us were put through regen, and we're on a 60 and back, and we're 2 years into it, and so we still have another 58 years that we have to deal with each other.
Okay.
And I recently met this man, real world, and he remembers me blowing up his head. And he also said that he's sorry his altar is that disrespectful of me, that I deserved better.
That's nice.
But I'm still demoted.
Yeah. Well.
And now I have a black mark on my record. And he did not allow it into the transcript for my court-martial, what he had done that I was responding to. So It makes me look completely irrational.
True.
So I put in an addendum that I sent to High Command and said, I want this added to this record, that this is why I did this. So, yeah.
Wow.
It's I had another commander, and men do not understand this reaction. But every woman I have told has understood exactly why I did this. Okay? I was in a long-term relationship with my commanding officer on a small ship, and he asked me out to a bar. I assumed it was a date. Silly me. We get there, and he's using it as an opportunity to reprimand me for my temper, not in front of the rest of the crew. I got mad and punched him. He reported it. I got demoted. No man has ever understood why I punched him. They thought he was within his rights, going to a private place to discuss my behavior. Every woman has understood we're in a relationship. He set it up like it was a date and then used it to scold me.
Yeah, that's bad.
So
Yeah.
I'm thinking we are in a relationship. He's thinking he's my CO.
Yeah, that's bad. Oh,
Yes,
there you go.
this is the problem.
Yeah.
Now, because of the nature of the German society out there, all of these ships, you're on these ships for a long time, even if you are based somewhere where you're off ship at night.
Okay.
Okay. You are in long-term relationships among the officer groups. And you are not allowed to fraternize with the enlisted or with anyone else, whether they be cyborgs, slaves, whatever. So you are limited to that group. So there are some long-term romantic relationships. They're not to the level of marriages, but they're close. And when they interfere with the job, you get in trouble for them.
Okay. True.
So this is the situation out there. I was on a ship with this man for 15 years. So, you know, actually not having a relationship would be what you would question, knowing the nature of humans.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing that's going on out there. And a lot of people are not discussing it. There are jealousy issues, there are confusement issues, because we're not the alters out there are put into clone bodies. So we are not necessarily the gender we are here, there.
Okay.
Yeah. They usually have me as female. Apparently, I don't do very well with testosterone.
I'd imagine.
So they have a hard enough time with me as a girl. So that's kind. The one that I punched, I know him real world, and he said that when he asked for me on his ship, that he was sent my file first, and that it has me listed as a troublemaker, as someone who does not take direction well, as someone who rebels against authority, AKA, I think for myself, and I get tired of being bullied. I get tired of being told to do the same stupid thing over and over and over and over. And when it didn't work the first 50 times, it's not going to work the next one. So,
Okay.
That's the kind of person I am on Earth, too.
So what happened when you, to the days, prior to, the time that you're going to be age regressed? Because I guess your service finished to an extent, and then...
It depends on which body I'm in.
Oh.
If I'm there in this body, I'm told, well, your contract's getting close to up. You need to finish up your work, and you need to report to such and such and be processed. And they do a debriefing, and then they travel me back to an Earth base. And it's usually a CIA related one. And they will basically put me under and use a viewing technology, and different times they've used different ones. So it's not the same one every time, but they use a process to go through my memories, and they erase the faces, they erase the names, they put in mental blocks for the projects I worked on. So I have trouble accessing the names of things. they put in cover memories that I have to work through to find out what really happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I cannot accept any memory as I first see it. So when I first get a new memory, what I do is I will put myself into self-hypnosis and I will say, show me what really happened, because your subconscious is a witness to everything all the alters do. And then the curtain will open and I will see the real thing. But I still have like faces missing and the names are gone, but I'll hear the original language, which I, Penny, may or may not speak. But I'll have an idea of what's going on. I'll have I'll have the visuals, I'll have the feels, the emotional part, I'll have the tastes, the smells, you know, the textures. I'll have all of that. I may not understand the words. So I have a relatively decent idea of what's going on.
Okay.
Now, not all the factions use your natural body. The Germans do, because their regeneration tank, if you go into that and you're in a clone, it's the clone's mind that will be revived, not yours. So it's kind of self-defeating to use clones.
Mm.
Okay, so all of the American versions use clones. That's one of the main things you can tell where you started is what kind of body you're in. Now, the Germans can use you up to 60 years in your natural body and still put you back.
Hmm.
So I have long ones with them. But the Americans, because it's a clone, after about 20 years, the clone's mind will push you out. So you can only be used in a clone for about 20 years.
Okay.
And that's part of why I have trouble understanding the current theories about people being in clones and all this crap on Earth, is because I know from experience when you are in a clone, okay, when you're in your real body, you feel every bit of it. It's you. You know, this is my hand. When you're in a clone, you're a squatter.
Mm.
And you know it. And you're having to push in enough to run the body. It's not a natural feel. You're possessing someone else and it feels like it. And as they get stronger over time, they push you out. And there are issues with that mind taking over because it's their body. And so when it comes to the time where you're having issues, they will just kill the clone and you automatically return to your natural body. So they do the memory work before they put you back.
Okay.
So they're still doing the memory work because they really don't want us to remember anything that will implicate them. You know, it's a federal felony, a capital offense to kidnap children. It's a capital offense to kill children in the time while they're kidnapped. It's a separate offense to torture children. Everything that they did to me, that 5 years that Langley had me, is a capital offense. So they sure as hell don't want me remembering their faces or their names or exactly where I was held. I know the base, but I don't know the building. And I have found most of them are not public, so I can't give their names. But I have found approximately 20 people who have memories of me in their own space service.
Wow.
And there is there was a DOD agent who was trying to arrange for me to be killed, but she told me that I was the last of the Langley class of 64, that everybody else is dead. What disgusted me the most was that she called it a class.
Ah, okay.
Like we were a university or something. Yeah. Finishing school. But that's their attitude. I am forever part of a class of people the military calls dissociatives. Those are people who have been through torture and are able to switch to alters.
Okay.
So people who have alters and are able to do work and then be switched back to their cover alter, their natural self, and not have memory of the work done in that alter. This is you talk to any higher level officer in the military, and I'm going to say probably captain or higher, and they know exactly what a dissociative is. They've worked with dissociatives. They know what we are. And that's what I am. The fact that I have alters proves that I have been traumatized as a small child. Mm-hmm. The fact that I shift alters uncontrollably proves that I'm a dissociative and that I have been traumatized as a small child. Now, as for what I remember as how it happened, we know these programs exist. There are declassified files about them all over the CIA's website. We know I have the symptoms, the signs of it. Mm-hmm. I have an MRI that shows that my brain hemispheres are split almost an inch apart, and that's consistent with being spun to prevent alter reintegration, which means that they're trying to keep me from doing this. So I have MRIs to prove that.
Wow.
So if we know it exists, I have the symptoms, I have proof of some of the work that was done on me. Why can't we believe how I got here?
Mm. It's so far out. It's so complicated for the normals to understand. Even today, even now, I'm trying to filter all what you've been talking about. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is a totally different worldview. But once you really see it, you can't go back. Hmm. My whole life I have known that what the mainstream view was wrong, that it was a lie. Mm-hmm. My whole life I've known this. And I've always been what they called a dissident because I knew it was a lie. And I've dug through and pointed out anomalies that proved it was a lie. And people just basically patted me on the head and said, you're a conspiracy theorist and blah, 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 blah. Well, now I remember why I'm weird. Mm. And everything that I have different hangs together. And more and more and more evidence is coming out to support I'm telling the truth as I know it.
Good.
Now, some of the stuff may be off base because, if they do one layer of cover memories, they may be doing a second, Mm-hmm. But the entire thing that I was kidnapped, I was put through this shit, I have alters for the rest of my life, and that I was used in military-related black ops. That's true. Now, I have friends on Facebook who are trying to tell me that what I remember happening is just virtual reality and it was all done in a cave. And I'm like,
I don't think so.
no.
No.
Okay. No, there's too many ETs involved, and they were physical beings that died when I shot them. They're not demons. They're physical beings that die when you shoot them.
Yeah.
So that's my definition is if it's 3D, it has a physical body and it dies when you shoot it. Just like people do.
Yeah.
Humans, Terrans. So this is a big thing because I get told, well, you're just seeing a hallucination, or you're just seeing spiritual beings taking a physical form. Okay. The government definitions are extraterrestrials are beings that are 3D physical and come here either through ships, physical ships, or through technology like jump gates. They're not from Earth. There are other terrestrials, which are the underground races, and the cryptids, who all live here, and they're all physical beings, including the Sasquatch Yeti. I guess they call them Yowlies in Australia. They have hyperdimensional capabilities, but they are physical beings. Mm-hmm. And then there are the ones that the government calls aliens, and they are interdimensionals. And for a while it was illegal to have contact with them because the government couldn't track them. Do you know that under their definition, God would be an alien? It's someone who does not have a physical form, even if they can manifest one for a short time, and gets here through non-physical means. That pretty much covers every religion on the planet, doesn't it? True. But the government can't track them, so it was illegal for a long time. I think they recently revoked that one.
Okay.
And there are a class of beings called plasmoids that are made out of vapors or smoke, water vapor, that kind of thing. Oh. They include the class of beings that the Greeks called archons and the Islamic people called jinn. Yeah. They are a vapor that can produce a concrete physical form, but they can't hold it for very long. They also have a really nasty attitude. And some of them are actually from Earth.
Really? Okay.
Some of them are from another dimension, but some of them are actually from Earth. So they're not extraterrestrials. And what else do they have? They have this whole list of categories. Okay. And these are things that some of them are legal and some of them are not. So when they start talking about illegal aliens, I'm going, what kind?
Yeah.
Are we talking people from another country, or are we talking spirits?
Oh.
So
anyhow, we could always call it a night. We've been at this for almost not 2 hours, but at least over an hour and a half.
Yeah, getting close to 2 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, this will be a long video for you to upload.
Yeah.
And I've wandered all over the place and hopefully given people something to think about.
I think that you did, at least for me, a lot to absorb, a lot of information. And well, what you've been talking about really, it's really close to what like Veronica Bartolini or Rebecca Rose talked about in past interviews. So you've been through a lot.
Well, I know most of the other speakers. We have private groups where we do group support. And I'm usually an admin in the ones that I'm in. And my standard advice is don't come public unless you have a fire in your gut and have to.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are too many long-term consequences. You can't take it back once it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And people have lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost custody of their kids. So those of us who have been public long-term, there are many deaths.
Oh.
I can name 3, 4 right off the top of my head. Bill Cooper, Max Spears,
Yeah.
William Whitecrow. They're just the top of the list. Phil Schneider.
True. Yeah.
So, if you are in this field very long, that's your fate. So don't go public unless you have a fire in your gut. And my other thing is, once you're out there, don't attack everybody else.
Yeah, we should at least help each other out.
Well, we're all remembering it the best we can. And we're from different groups out there. So, of course, what we remember, what we experienced is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
So don't expect the details to match up.
True.
They're not gonna. I mean, think about World War II. If you were in Europe, your story is going to be different than if you were in the Pacific, even if you were on the same side. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people there are 6 factions that I know of in space. And 2 of them are at war with each other. So.
Well, thanks for coming on, Penny. You've been a dear, and I know you went through a lot. So thanks for your courage, and I hope you continue doing what you do. And so for those who had the chance of watching tonight's interview, I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you guys next time, and more interviews coming up. So take care, everyone. Hello everyone, this is Mr. Gray, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.